tell me A, B, and C from this quadratic? Who can tell me that? Steven? All right, so that's the first step. Go ahead and fill that in. 1, -2, -3. Okay, axis of symmetry is x equals opposite of B over 2A. So the way I like to think of that is whatever the sign is that I have right here, I'm going to flip it. So if this is a negative, then I'm going to make it what? Positive. Jaden, can you take off your headset for me? Thank you so much. I'm going to make it positive. And we're dividing that by 2 times A, which is 1. So go ahead. Figure out what you think this number is. This should be a number. 2 divided by 2 times 1. So first you want to multiply, and then you're going to divide. So 2 times 1 is what? 2. 2 times 1 is 2. Good. And what's 2 divided by 2? 1. Do we agree that 2 divided by 2 is 1? All right, so you're going to write x equals 1 right here on that line. All right, now where do I put that 1? After you find that number, it goes right in the middle of our table. So we put our 1 right here. And go backwards and forward. So if we count on our number line, this is 1. This is 1. We want to count back. So that would be 0 and -1, 2 and 3. Okay, now we got to pick up our calculators. And when you type it in your calculator, it's x squared, so that would be a parentheses squared minus 2 parentheses minus 3. So we're going to start by putting in 3. So type this in your calculator just like that. So type that in just like that, that first y value. So I want everyone to start filling in your table. First, you're going to type in a 3, and then you're going to type in a 2, a 1, a 0, and a -1. So you should get 5 y values. So when you type it in, you see right here, which button did you use? You use this one? You gotta use this one. Okay, so this should be a subtraction sign, not a negative sign. So let's be right. Anyone else need help with their calculator, typing it in? Xavier, what you get for the first one? What you get for 3? 0. Anybody else get 0? All right, good. Go ahead, fill in the next one. Find 2. Find 1. So this is really, really important because, again, our test is a week from today. So you're going to have to graph all by yourself. So I really want you to practice getting comfortable with the calculator. What did you get for 2? -3? Who else got -3? All right, what about 1? -4. 0, what did you get? -3, and you should get a 0. So notice how a parabola is symmetrical. Whatever you get here, you should also get here. Those two numbers should match. So let's go ahead and graph that. Let's graph these 5 points. And it should look like a smile. Okay, so your vertex is your middle point. So this here, this point in the middle of the table, you can also see it on the graph because it's your lowest point. So what is the order pair for our vertex? 1, -4. So let's go ahead and write that in. And your y-intercept, you can actually verify it 2 different ways. Which one of these numbers is going to give me the y-intercept? Is it A, B, or C? C, yep. So we can actually fill that in. That's my y-intercept. And if we look at our graph, let me zoom in on the graph. Do you see how that is where the graph, it crossed the y-axis? So -1, -2, -3. This is my y-intercept. And you would write that as an ordered pair. All right, raise your hand if you finished the 2 questions on the back of homework 1 yesterday. Okay, so you will have some more time today to work on that. All right, so we actually got a really short lesson today. Go ahead, pull out your notes. We're going to talk about another way to graph. So in your notes, I want you to go to page 5. And this is another way to write a quadratic equation. Transformation form. So on Wednesday when we began Chapter 12, we talked about the 3 different ways to write a quadratic equation. One was general form, one was factor form, and the last way is transformation form. All right, when you have a quadratic written in this format, it's super helpful. There's 3 numbers that will tell us everything we need to know in order to graph it. The first one is A. So let's talk about A. A has a couple of superpowers. The first thing that A will do, if A is negative, that is going to cause our graph to reflect down. In other words, that makes the graph turn to a frown. That's what that A value will do. When A is negative, it can cause the graph, it will cause the graph to reflect down. Now, when A is greater than 1, it is going to cause it to stretch. Or in other words, it gets narrow or skinny. So that makes your parabola look really skinny. That's what happens when A is greater than 1. It gets narrow. And when A is a fraction, what's the opposite of narrow? Or instead of it getting narrow, it's going to compress, which means it gets wide. So that's the difference. So A, that number in front of the parentheses, has 3 superpowers. It can make it flip down to a frown. It can make it get skinny or narrow, or it can stretch it out and make it wide. All right, the second thing is H. So let's talk about H. Now, H is kind of strange because it's always inside. H is located inside of the parentheses. So it's inside, but it's always opposite of what you see in the parentheses. And we'll talk about that. So you can find that H value on the inside. It's opposite of what you see. And what that makes the parabola do is go left and right. Now, in integrated 1, did you talk about AH and K? Does that sound familiar? No? Okay, so H moves it left and right. And then our last component is K. K, whenever K is positive, so do you see how it says K is greater than 1? This means whenever K is positive. If K is positive, it's going to move the graph up. But when it is negative, what do you think it's going to do? Move the graph what? Down. So what we're going to do today is simply identify our AH and K. We're just going to finish out this page. We'll graph on Monday. And this is the big part of your test. Or we may graph one today. But we're going to identify our AH and K and just describe how it's going to change the graph. That's it. All right, so let's look at this one here. So A, remember, A is always in front. So what do you think this invisible number is right here in front? So it's not a 1, it's a -1. So let's put a -1 for A. And what did I say? What happens to the graph when A is negative? What does it make the graph do? Flip. So we're going to write our transformation is going to reflect down. Because of our A value being negative, this is going to cause my parabola to reflect down. Now, H is always on the inside, but it's opposite. So do you see how it says +7? It's going to be -7. So let's put that -7. H moves the graph left and right. And because it's negative, it's going to move it to the left 7. And then lastly is our K value, which is in the back. So K is -3. So that's going to cause our graph to go down 3. Those are our transformations. The vertex, which is the lowest part of the parabola, is always at HK. So HK is our vertex. So our vertex for this one is at -7, -3. All right, any questions about number 1? Yes, Cortez.
Could you also find a vertex after you solve it too?
Yep, you sure can. All right, let's look at number 2. I want you to look at number 2 and just write what you think A, H, and K would be from this equation. Write what you think your A, H, and K would be. So, any guesses? What did you write for A? Anybody want to volunteer what you wrote for A? Cortez, what you write for A, H, and K?
2, -3, and +2.
Perfect. So because A is 2, let me go back over here. Remember we said whenever A is bigger than 1, look in this box. 2 is bigger than 1. Would you agree that 2 is bigger than 1?
Yeah.
So because 2 is bigger than 1, the first transformation you're going to tell me is that it stretches. So let's write that down. It's going to stretch. So because A is 2, I'm going to write that down. It is going to stretch. Now, H is -3. What do you think that's going to make the graph do? Is it going to go left 3 or right 3? If it's negative, it goes to the left. So write left 3. And K is +2. So what is that going to make the graph do? Up 2 or down 2? Up 2. All right, and your vertex is at H and K, so that would be -3 and 2. All right, try to do the next one by yourself. Find your A, H, and K, and then tell me the transformation. All right, any volunteers to tell me A, H, and K? Okay, Juan, what'd you get? 1/4. What's H? +10. And what's K? 13. Good. So it's A is 1/4. So remember, when if A is a fraction, do you see how it says A is a fraction? What you're going to say is you can either say compress or you can say wider. I would take either one on the test. But it's going to compress or it gets wider. So I'm going to say that it compresses. All right, King, what do you think is going to happen because H is +10? What is that going to make the graph do? Because H is +10, what is that going to make the graph do? Go right, good. So it's going to go right 10. H moves the graph left and right, so it's going to go right 10. And then Stacy, because K is 13, what is that going to make the graph do? Up 13. So your vertex is at H and K, so that means my vertex is at 10, 13. All right, try to do number 4 by yourself. Find your A, H, and K. And I'm going to pick 3 people to help me fill in my transformations. So, Rylan, what would you put for your AH and K? You said what? 1 for A, yep. +4 or -4? -4. +2 or -2? -2, good. Xavier, because H is -4, what is that going to make my graph do? Because my H is -4. Go left 4, good. Now, A is 1. That's the same as our parent. So we don't have a change because this does not give us a change. There is no change. But that -4 and that -2 will give us a change. So Jasmine, what about K being -2? What is that going to make our graph do? Go, what'd you say? Yeah, go down 2, good. So where is our vertex going to be? -4, -2. All right, we do have enough time because we still got about a good 20 minutes. So we're going to do one graph today. Just one. And let's look at number 5 and let's graph one out. Now, before we do that, we're going to graph it. So let's look at this one here. So looking here, what is my A value? What's the number in front of the parentheses? 1. Now, H is tricky because it's always the opposite. So even though you see a -2, H is really +2. Good. And what's K? -4. So we know that this parabola is going to have a vertex at 2, -4. All right, so let's go ahead and state our transformations. There's only 2 transformations that we're going to have. The first transformation, because H is 2, what is that going to make my graph do? Go to the right 2. So let's write that. So this graph is going to go right 2. And because K is -4, Xavier, what is that going to make the graph do? Go down 4, good. Okay, so we're going to do our graph. And what we have right here, this is our parent. So I want you to go ahead and graph these 5 points. So let's go ahead and graph these 5 ordered pairs. This represents the parent. So plot these 5 points off to the side. I'm going to write it over here too. I want you to plot these 5 points. So, and then we'll do our second parabola. But this represents the parent. Every graph has a parent, and the parent is just plain old y equals x squared. So we're going to graph these 5 points. And these are the same 5 points that you see here in this table. I just wrote it off to the side as ordered pairs. But these are the same points that we have here. Yes, sir. Like right now while I'm teaching? No. But you can send me an email and we can talk about it though.
Gotcha. Am I able to take it today?
You could come during 5th period. Anytime 5th. Or even 4th. Okay. Okay, so -2. So let's go ahead and plot these points. So we have -2, 4. And then we have, so these are our 5 points. We're going to go ahead and plot these points. And this is just the parent. And now we're ready to apply our transformations. Now, when you apply a transformation, it's always, you see how we have this at the top of the table? You always take your H and add it to X. And then you take your Y, multiply it by A, and add K. So what did we say H was at the beginning? What is H? 2. So what I want you to do is pick up your calculator. But before you do that, I want you to go ahead and write this out. Write 2 plus all the way down. Because H is 2. So go ahead and pick up your calculator and give me these 5 numbers. So you're going to take 2 plus negative 2 and write it right here. 2 plus negative 1 and write that right here. 2 plus 0. Leo, you okay? 2 plus 1 and 2 plus 2. If you need to stand up, you can. So go ahead and write these 5 numbers off to the side. We got our 5 numbers? So what we're doing is we're creating new ordered pairs. That's what we're doing. We're making our new ordered pairs in the middle. And then for your y values, you're going to multiply them by a. And what did we say a was? 1. And we're going to add k. So we're multiplying by 1 and adding a negative 4. So I want you to go ahead and do that to get your y values. And then when you have your points, go ahead and put your pencils down so I know we have them all. Check yours. See, do you have the same points I have? Thumbs up if your points are the same as my points. All right, so let's go ahead and graph it. What'd you say, Juan? You could show Mr. Suchi. He can help you figure out. Juan has a question. It might be a calculator thing. You say your points don't look like this? Okay, yeah, he'll look at it. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph these. Let's go ahead and graph these. If you have another color, if not, that's okay. Because on the test, you're going to have to graph them both. You're going to have to graph the parent, and you need to graph the transformation. So we're going to have 2 parabolas. So let's go ahead and graph our point. So we got a point at 0, 0. I'm going to graph my second one in red. And then at 1, I'm going down to negative 3. So your test is a week from today. And this is what your question, this is the main question looks like this, so. And when you compare these 2 graphs, so this is the mama graph right here. Can you see how the red graph, it did exactly what we said it would do? It moved to the right 2 and down 4. That's the transformation of our 2 graphs. Okay, I'm going to end there. Any questions so far? And I know I said I wasn't going to do this, but I am going to pass out the homework. Can you pass it? I think it's over there. I'm gonna go ahead and pass out homework 2. For homework 2, if you finish homework 2, you can go ahead and start on homework 1. I mean, if you finish homework 1, you can go ahead and start on homework 2. And if you have questions, we are here to help. But I want to be clear that right now during this time, we are working on homework, either homework 1 or homework 2. So you choose which one you want to work on, homework 1 or homework 2.